My name is Emily. I was 21 when my mom sold the piano my grandfather gave me. Just to buy my sister a car. Not just any piano. It was my childhood, my sanctuary, the very thing that got me into music school. I had been secretly preparing a birthday concert for her mom on that very instrument, but she didn't ask. Didn't hesitate. Just sold it like it meant nothing. Kelly needs the car. She said, you can play at school. Didn't cry. I bought a concert ticket instead. And I sent it to her, not out of revenge, out of clarity. Before we begin, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if this story hits something in you, because sometimes silence plays louder than words. I grew up in a small faded yellow house on the edge of Roseville, Illinois. It wasn't big. That was mine. My mother, Margaret, though everyone called her Maggie, raised us alone after my dad walked out when I was 6. He worked 2 jobs. Sometimes 3, and I'll never take that away from her. But love, didn't split evenly in our house. There were 2 daughters under that roof. Kelly, the older one by 3 years, was the golden child, the go-getter, as Mom would proudly say. Cheer squad captain, homecoming queen, president of 2 clubs by senior year. She had the big hair, the bright smile, the confidence that filled a room before she even walked in. And then there was me, quiet, awkward Emily. I didn't sparkle the way Kelly did. I didn't speak up much. Didn't like crowds, but I played. God, did I play. Started plinking away at the keys when I was 5. Sitting on a stack of books just to reach them. My grandfather, Mom's dad, was the one who noticed. He was the one who saved up for a second-hand upright piano and gave it to me on my 8th birthday. That piano wasn't just an instrument. It was my anchor, my secret diary. I used to crawl under it when I was scared of storms, listening to the echo of the strings vibrating in the dark. I'd fall asleep there sometimes, my cheek against the hardwood, for feeling safe. But in our house, love was transactional. Whenever Kelly needed something, she got it. Summer dance camp in New York. Mom borrowed money from Aunt Linda. Private as a tutor. Mom sold her engagement ring. When I asked for extra lessons with my music teacher, Mom just sighed. Well, spoiler alert, we never did. Once when I was 12, I had to drop out of a regional piano competition I'd trained months for because Kelly got into a last-minute volleyball clinic and Mom said, you understand, right? Your sister needs this for college. Another time when I turned 16, I thought I might finally get my own room, but no. Kelly needed the bigger space to study better, so I stayed in the converted laundry room with no window. Every time Mom would give me that look, the one that said, be the good one. Then came the line she used like a lullaby. Kelly just needs a little more right now, sweetie. You understand, don't you? I did understand. I understood that my worth in that house wasn't measured in achievements or love, but in silence. The less I asked for, the better I wore that role like armor. Good daughter. Quiet support system. Invisible. So I worked harder. I practiced in the early mornings before school and stayed behind after class to use the music room. One small recital, local competitions earned praise from teachers, but Mom rarely came to watch. Kelly's game overlaps, she'd text, or I'll try to make the next one. Funny thing is, I never stopped hoping she would show up. Grandpa was the only one who did. Every single time he'd bring a thermos of lemon tea and a giant camcorder from the 90s, he'd say, that piece sounded like rain falling through sunlight, and I'd believe him even when my hands were shaking. When he passed away during my sophomore year, something cold settled in our house. Mom didn't cry much. Kelly just shrugged, and I played the piano all night. The keys were wet by the time I finished. That was the last time anyone mentioned him. By senior year, I earned a partial scholarship to a music conservatory 3 hours away. It wasn't Juilliard, but it was mine. I remember bringing the acceptance letter to the kitchen, holding it up like a golden ticket. Blinked, then smiled. That's great, honey, she said. But how will we cover the rest? I told her I'd figure it out. I could teach beginner piano lessons, maybe work at the campus. I didn't expect her to pay. I just wanted her to be proud. Turned and asked, did you hear? Kelly's being interviewed by this big tech startup in Seattle. He gets in. She'll need a car. I might ask Uncle Bob about a loan. And just like that, my moment evaporated again. So I didn't complain. I packed my bags, brought the piano sheet music Grandpa had annotated, and promised myself one thing. I would build something that couldn't be taken away. The piano stayed behind. It was too heavy, too fragile to move. But I visited it every time I came home. Sometimes just to touch the keys, to remember who I was before the world started asking me to shrink. Gone like it had never meant anything to her. College was different. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The conservatory campus sat at the edge of a sprawling park filled with red maples and winding cobblestone paths. It smelled like wet leaves and every morning I passed the main recital hall and ran my fingers along its old brick wall like I was greeting a friend. My dorm was small and drafty, but I didn't care. I was free. I was finally allowed to be just Emily, not Kelly's shadow or Mom's afterthought. My roommates were loud, messy violinists who laughed in four linguists and played pranks with tuning forks. And somehow they made me feel more seen in 2 weeks than my family had in 2 decades. I still didn't have my piano. That stayed home. But the practice rooms downstairs had beautiful Steinways, and I booked them like clockwork. Every day from 6 to 8 o'clock a.m. before anyone else was awake. I claimed that quiet space, poured everything into those keys. But it wasn't just about playing pieces anymore. I started writing. It began as fragments, melodies that reminded me of Grandpa's smile, chord progressions that sounded like rainy windows and lemon. I scribbled notes on napkins, on the backs of class syllabi, even on my arms. My professor noticed. "You're composing," he said one day after hearing me rehearse. "You ever think about putting this into a show?" First I laughed. Me compose an entire piece. But the idea planted itself, and like all stubborn things, it grew. I decided to write something special, something personal, a single composition, part classical, part modern, that would tell a story without words. A story only I could tell. I called it Mother's Song even before I knew what it would sound like. It was going to be my birthday gift to Mom. I'd perform it during winter break back home in Roseville. I'd invite a few neighbors, some old teachers, maybe a couple of cousins, just a little living room concert, homemade programs printed at the library, cookies and cider on a folding table. And her. I just wanted her to hear me, really hear me for once. I spent weeks preparing, my fingers cramped from rehearsals. I borrowed microphones from the AV club to record practice sessions, reviewing every wrong note at night like a coach watching game. I budgeted every tutoring dollar. I made $10 an hour teaching kids Twinkle Twinkle in mismatched tempos so I could take the bus home and rent a mini sound system. I imagined the look on her face when I played the final note. How maybe, just maybe, she'd see who I had become. Not just the quiet girl in the corner, but a musician. A woman who made something real. I wrote her a handwritten invitation, folded into a card, slipped it into the mail with a wax seal. Cheesy, I know, but I wanted it to feel special. I pictured her reading it over coffee, smiling. A week before the concert, I called to confirm. She sounded distracted. "Oh, that weekend," she said. "We might have something for Kelly going on." I told her I'd already planned everything, that it was for her. She paused, then softened her voice like she was talking to a child. "Sweetie, it's just a little song, right? Maybe we can do it another time." No, it wasn't just a little song. It was everything. But I didn't say that. I just smiled into the piano keys in the practice room. Then I played. Not the song I had written. One long low note that lingered in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. Still, I wasn't ready to give. A few days later, I packed my bag, took the bus home with my composition in a folder, and stepped back into that yellow house, determined to play for whoever would listen. But something felt off the moment I walked in. The living room was different. Quieter, emptier. And then I saw it. The wall where my piano used to sit bare. No bench, no frame, just silence. My heart dropped. I turned to Mom, who was stirring something on the stove. "Where's the piano?" She didn't look up. "Oh, I sold it. Kelly needed a car for her interviews. You understand, right?" She finally glanced at me and shrugged. "It was old. You have pianos at school." Kelly walked in, jangling keys. "Thanks again, Mom." The guy even threw in Bluetooth. I think I nodded. I don't remember. I just remember clutching the folder in my bag. The one with Mother's Song inside. The song she'd never hear. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the guest room. The piano was gone. He sold. Just like that. No warning, no discussion. It wasn't just a piece of furniture. It wasn't even just a piano. It was the last thing I had from Grandpa. The only thing in that house that ever felt like mine. And now it was gone because Kelly needed Bluetooth. I remember getting up around 2 a.m. Sneaking into the living room in the dark, hoping maybe that I'd find it tucked into a corner waiting for me. Like always. But the wall was still bare, empty, like my voice didn't matter. The next morning at breakfast I tried one last time. Mom, that piano do. You know how much it meant to me. She didn't even flinch. She kept buttering toast. It was just sitting there, Emily. Collecting dust. You barely come home anymore. And Kelly's job interview is in. Ew. She needs a car. I looked at Kelly. She kept shifted awkwardly. Pouring orange juice. I didn't know she'd sell it, she muttered. I'm sorry. But there wasn't any real apology in her voice, just inconvenience. I was going to use it, I said softly, for something important. I had a piece, something I wrote for Mom for her birthday. Mom blinked, then frowned like I was speaking another language. My birthday's in 2 weeks. I took a breath. I know. I was going to perform it this weekend. Early. I sent you an invitation. Did you not see it? Her expression didn't change. Well, that letter. I thought it was one of those school things. School things. That's all I was to her. The background noise. I worked all semester on that composition. I said I wanted to surprise you. I wanted you to hear me. Kelly stood up, grabbing her purse. Look, Em, you're talented, okay? But you can still play at school. This was just a practical decision. Practical. That word felt like a slap. After they left to go test drive the new ride, I sat alone at the kitchen table. My music folder was still in my bag. I didn't open it. I couldn't. The house felt different. Not just empty, hostile. Like, even the walls had chosen sides. Later that evening, I walked past the hall closet where Grandpa used to keep his toolbox. It was still there, same rusty handle. But the moment I opened the door, something fell out. A receipt. It was folded, crumpled, but the words hit me like thunder. Upright piano, $150. Condition, good. Buyer Henson's used goods, $150. That piano was worth at least $2,000, probably more. But she'd sold it for quick cash to a second-hand furniture reseller. Not to a school, not to a student who'd love it. But speed mattered more than meaning. I sat on the floor staring at the receipt, my back pressed against the coat rack. My chest felt tight, like every memory tied to those keys had just been tossed into someone else's living room. He didn't just sell wood and wires. She sold the lullabies, the rainy nights, the applause Grandpa gave me when no one else showed up. And now I had nothing to give her. No music, no performance, no more trying. That weekend, instead of playing Mother's song, I watched from the hallway as Mom threw a surprise dinner party for Kelly. There were balloons, a big cake that said, "Congrats, Kelly," in pink cursive. And Aunt Linda drove in from 2 towns over. Everyone clapped when Kelly walked in, holding flowers and showing off her new car key. I stood behind the corner wall, completely invisible. At one point, Mom raised her glass and said, "To Kelly, our shining star, you're going to do amazing things, honey. We're all so proud." No one noticed me walk upstairs. No one asked where I was. Later that night, I passed by the living room one last time. The space where my piano had a giant house plant in it. Mom said it brightened the space. I thought it made everything feel fake. I changed the ending. I didn't plan on staying long. After that, the next morning I packed quietly. The music folder went back into my bag, same place it had always been, but somehow it felt heavier now, like it was carrying all the words I hadn't said. I walked past the kitchen where Mom was scrolling through her phone, humming. "Heading back early?" she asked, not looking up. I nodded. "Yeah, got it. Shift at the campus cafe." She smiled faintly. "Don't forget to wish your sister good luck. Her final round. Interviews next week." That was it. No mention of the concert. No mention of the missing piano. "No, I'm sorry." Not even a second glance. I didn't answer. On the way out, I stopped by the piano. Space where the houseplant now lived, and just stood there. For a second, I imagined I could hear the faint echo of keys under my fingertips. A ghost's melody only I remembered. But ghosts don't get closure. I took the bus back to campus and tried to throw myself into routine. Morning practice, evening. Tutoring, essays, scales, caffeine. But something had changed. My fingers stumbled more. The notes felt hollow. It was like I'd lost the one person in the audience I'd always secretly hoped would clap. And then came the final twist of the knife. 1 week later, my birthday. I wasn't expecting much. Maybe a text, maybe nothing. But that morning I opened my phone to a flood of family. Photos posted online. A dinner, a cake, streamers. My mom had thrown a party. Not for me, for Kelly. Again, she got the job. The big tech firm in Seattle had hired her. Mom went all out. Catered food, champagne, congratulations to our superstar. Spelled out in gold balloons on the wall. I used to hang my recital posters on. I scrolled through the pictures numb. And then in the background of one shot I saw it. A gift table piled high and sitting front and center was my music folder. My folder. I zoomed in, recognized the frayed corner. The ink stain on the cover, the faint crease from when I'd fallen asleep on it during finals week. It wasn't a copy. It was mine. I called. Why is my music folder at Kelly's party? He paused. Then laughed like it was no big deal. Oh, that Kelly said she wanted to show it to some friends. She mentioned how you were working on something for class. I figured you wouldn't mind. I couldn't breathe. That music was private. It wasn't finished. It wasn't for showing off. It was for you. There was a silence. Then Mom sighed. Emily, you're being dramatic. You act like Kelly's success somehow takes away from yours. You two should support each other, not keep score. Support each other like I hadn't spent my whole life cheering from the sidelines while they kept score with my life. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. That night I went to the practice room, pulled out the second copy I'd made of Mother's song, and played it through one last time. The melody was still there, but something inside me wasn't. After I finished, I stared at the keys in the dim light and whispered, "Happy birthday, Mom." And then I closed the lid. I didn't play again for weeks. I didn't touch a piano for 37 days. Not at school, not in town, not even in my dreams. It was like my fingers forgot how. Or maybe my heart just refused. At first, I told my professors I was sick. Then I started skipping composition classes altogether. I withdrew from my small tutoring gigs. I didn't return texts from classmates or answer calls from my roommates. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain. I just wanted to disappear, because what do you do when the thing you love most gets treated like clutter? Like something you could sell off for a used car and a slice of cake. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that wall back home, once filled with music, now taken over by a $140.0 house plant from Target. And that music folder. I remember lying in bed one night staring at the cracked ceiling in my dorm, asking a question I had buried for years. Was I ever really wanted? Not tolerated, not the quiet one, but wanted. The thing is, when you grow up, being the backup plan, you start thinking that love is something you earn. That if you're good enough, patient enough, quiet enough, one day someone will finally look at you and say, "I see you." But that day never came. Not from her. And now, for the first time, I wasn't just sad. I was angry. Angry at my mom, angry at Kelly, angry at myself for thinking a song could fix years of silence. That if I just composed the right melody, she'd finally hear me. But I was also tired, deep down to the bones. Tired. I stopped going to classes. I slept too much. Ate too little. My hair started falling out. In the shower. I stopped wearing headphones, not because I didn't want to hear music, but because it physically hurt to remember it. One afternoon, I got a message from my composition professor. "Are you okay? I miss hearing your work." Instead, I wandered to a park across town and sat on a bench for 3 hours, just breathing, watching the wind rustle through bare trees. It was late winter, right at that edge where the air feels like it's about to turn but never quite does. That's where Natalie found me. She was a violinist I used to play with during first-year ensemble. Bright red hair, paint-stained fingers, always carried her instrument like a limb. We hadn't talked much lately. "Hey," she said, sitting beside me without asking. "You vanished." I shrugged. Thought maybe you died or joined a cult, she joked, then added more gently. "Or maybe something worse." I didn't say anything. She reached into her bag and pulled out a granola bar. handed it to me without being. You still composing? I shook my head. Not anymore. He didn't push, just nodded slowly like she knew that silence was its own kind of answer. Then she said something I didn't expect. There's this place, a community music center off Jefferson, run by an old chist who thinks Bach can cure depression and that pianos should be treated like royalty. They let anyone play, especially students. I didn't answer. I'm heading there Saturday, she added. Come if you want. Don't if you don't, but I think the pianos miss you. She left before I could say no. That night I pulled out my folder again. Not the original because that one was still somewhere in Kelly's closet, but a photocopy I'd made months ago. It smelled like dust and regret. I stared at the title, Mother's Song. Then almost without realizing it, I flipped to the last page, the one I had changed. And for the first time since the birthday that wasn't, I saw something new. The pain had made it better, more raw, more human, more me. I wasn't playing to be loved anymore. I was composing to survive. I showed up that Saturday. I didn't plan to. I told myself I was just going to walk past the building, maybe peek through the window, maybe not even go in, but my feet didn't get the memo. Somehow, I ended up standing in front of a small brick building with ivy creeping up its side and a handmade sign out front that read Jefferson Music Collective. Open ears, open doors. Inside it smelled like old wood and lemon polish. The kind of place where sounds linger longer than they should. Followed the hallway past a row of rehearsal rooms and paused when I heard a familiar sound. A cello playing. Something soft and sorrowful, like memory turned into melody. Natalie was there. She glanced up from her sheet. Music, gave me a nod like she'd been expecting me all along, and went back to playing. A woman waved me over, older, with streaks of silver in her hair and laugh lines like map trails across her cheeks. First time? She asked. I nodded. Name's Sylvia. Coffee is terrible, but the pianos are heavenly. Want a tour? Smiled, a small but real, and followed her. The last room on the left was dimly lit. No windows, just a chandelier made of old violin bows and a small stage. And in the middle of the room was my piano. My actual piano. I froze. There. It was. The same sun-fed finish, the chipped ivory on middle C, the sticker Grandpa had once put on the side that read. I took a step forward, afraid it might vanish. Sylvia watched me carefully. You okay? That piano used to be mine. I whispered. It was sold. Thought it was gone. She nodded slowly. It came through a dealer who didn't know what he had. A gentleman named Raymond. Bought it last fall. Donated it here when we reopened. Raymond? I asked. Retired jazz pianist, has a soft spot for instruments with stories. I blinked, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. He comes in every Wednesday, she added. You should meet him. She didn't push. Approached the piano like greeting an old friend at a funeral. Gently unsure if I was allowed to feel joy again. Then I sat, ran my fingers across the keys, and played. Not Mother's Song. Not yet. Just notes, broken pieces of things I hadn't finished. But the sound, it was right, like my hands remembered what my heart had forgotten. Afterward I stayed. Every day that week I returned to the center. I cleaned the practice room, helped tune instruments, taught one little girl how to find middle C. Wasn't school. It wasn't recital halls or big scholarships or sheet music stamped with formal logos, but it was music. Real, messy, imperfect music. And then on Wednesday Raymond arrived. He was older than I imagined. Wrinkled, wiry, with hands that looked too brittle to play. But when he touched the keys, it was like watching wind through a forest. You must be Emily, he said after my first piece. You know my name. He smiled. The piano told me. I laughed, not a fake polite laughs. Real one. I think we were meant to cross paths, he said. This piano has a way of finding the right players, and I think you've got something the world needs to hear. I shook my head. I don't think anyone's ever really listened. He raised a brow. Then let's give them no choice. That night Sylvia pulled me aside. We're hosting a winter gala in 3 weeks, he said. Fundraiser for music education. Small event, big crowd, local press. Would you consider performing? I hesitated. Raymond says, your piece deserves a stage. She didn't know what that meant to me. I said yes. That night for the first time in over a year, I sat down and rewrote Mother's song completely. I didn't change the story. I changed the ending. No more longing. No more asking for applause. That would never come. I added a movement called the farewell ticket, a card that said everything I'd never had. The courage to say out loud. Then I printed 2 copies of the program, folded them neatly and mailed one to my mother and one to Kelly. Front row seats, center aisle. Let's see if they listen now. The night of the gala, the sky over Jefferson Street was painted in deep violet and gold. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the air had that sharp electric stillness, like the world was holding its breath. I arrived 2 hours early, wore a simple black dress, low heels, no makeup. I didn't want to perform tonight. I wanted to speak, in music was the only language they'd ever let me speak in. The concert hall wasn't big, just a 100 chairs, a small stage and soft amber lights. But it felt holy. Not in a religious sense. In a way, a room becomes sacred when truth is about to be told. Natalie helped with tuning. Raymond sat in the second row, leaning forward like he already knew what was coming. And then at 6:42 p.m. the doors opened and they walked in. My mother and Kelly. They were dressed like they'd come straight from a dinner party. Heels, lipstick, coats that smelled expensive. Mom looked around like she wasn't sure where she was. Kelly spotted me across the room but didn't wave. Her face said everything. Awkward, defensive, confused. They took their seats in the front row, exactly where the envelope had told them to. I didn't greet them. At 7 o'clock sharp the lights dimmed. Sylvia stepped on stage, introduced the evening. 3 performances before me. 2 students. 1 duet. I waited backstage, not nervous, not angry, ready. When my name was called, I stepped out into the light. Applause scattered politely. I didn't look at my family. I sat down at the piano. My piano placed. It wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a reclamation. It was childhood afternoons with Grandpa's thermos. It was nights under the piano during thunderstorms. It was the silence of being invisible in my own house. It was the sound of sacrifice, of love unreturned, of choosing yourself when no one else does. Each note told a story. And when I reached the final movement, the farewell ticket, I poured into it every ounce of what I had lost. The betrayal, the grief, the moment I found the piano. Again, the hope I didn't know I still carried. The last note rang out like the end of a sentence long withheld. And then silence. No clapping yet, just stillness. Judd bowed. Only then did I look at them. My mom's face was frozen. Kelly's eyes were wide, glassy. They recognized the piano. They recognized me. After the applause swelled and faded, I stepped off stage. I didn't go to the back. I walked straight toward them. Mom rose first. She opened her mouth like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. And thank you for selling it. She blinked. What? The piano. I nodded. Because you sold it, I found it again. And this time I play it for me, not for your approval. You were never invisible, Mom said quietly. I met her eyes. Maybe, but you never looked. I turned to go. No drama, no yelling, just release. And before I left, I handed her a copy of the program. She looked down. Read the title. Mother's Song. There beneath the dedication, a single line written in bold italic. This was never song. It was everything I never got to say. It wasn't from my mom. It wasn't from Kelly. It was from a producer at a small classical arts nonprofit in Chicago. He had been in the audience that night and asked if I'd consider performing Mother's Song again, this time on a bigger stage. Said yes, not because I needed the validation, but because that song, which had once felt like a cry for attention, had become something else entirely. A full circle testament to everything I'd endured and everything I had let go. Things changed after that, though not in the fairy tale way. My mother sent me a message on Facebook, just a few lines. I read it once, twice, then closed the app. I didn't reply. Maybe one day I will, but not today, because healing doesn't always need a conversation. Sometimes walking away is the conversation. Kelly didn't reach out, but I saw her post a quote on Instagram a few weeks later. Some things break you before they build you. I wondered if she understood what that meant, or if it was just decoration like the rest of her curated life. But by then I didn't care. I moved into a small studio apartment above a bakery that plays Jaws at night. I took a job teaching music at the community center where kids like me could find pianos and people who listened. I started writing again, Not to Be Heard. Mother's Song became the first track on a new project. One where every piece tells a version of the truth I never had space to say. Growing up. No masks, no waiting for permission. And the funny thing, people did hear me, but more importantly, I heard myself. I don't know if my mother will ever sit through an entire concert. I don't know if she'll ever understand how much a chipped piano meant to a quiet little girl who just wanted to be seen. But I've made peace with that because family doesn't begin or end with blood. It begins with recognition. And I finally learned to recognize myself. The stage lights don't scare me anymore. Neither does silence. I learned that silence can be chosen, not just endured. I've also learned that forgiveness isn't always about letting someone back in. Sometimes it's about letting someone. So to anyone out there who's ever been told to shrink so someone else could shine, to anyone who's had their songs sold off for spare parts, let me tell you this. You are not invisible. You are not too much or too quiet or too late. And when they finally ask how you made it through, look them in the eye and say, I turned what they broke into music. And let them sit in the front row to hear it. Now, if this story found something inside you, I'd love to know. Where are you watching from today? Have you ever had to reclaim a piece of yourself that others gave away? Drop it in the comments below. And if you're still looking for your piano, it's out there. And when you find it, I hope you play it so loud they can't look away.